Oh, I need to watch out for when it starts.
It's starting. You're in.
Greetings, everyone. Nathan Nerdarchy here from Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds. And with me, I have Nerdarchist Dave and a guest, Chad. If you'd like to introduce yourself, say a little bit about yourself, go right ahead, Chad.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chad. I'm a gaming nerd, just like you. I play tabletop role-playing games, fantasy, science fiction, whatever. I happen to write one called Cryptomancer. It's a bog standard fantasy game about elves and orcs and all that. It just happens to teach people how hacking works. So that's me.
Thanks.
All right.
And,
So
go ahead.
So Chad, let's start off with, how were you inspired to create this? Why were you and how were you inspired to create this game? How did Cryptomancer come about?
Sure. So my career is actually in cybersecurity. And one of my roles, official roles or unofficial roles throughout the past 5 or 6 years has involved explaining IT and security concepts to different business units in these big corporations. So yeah, I spend most of my time abstracting IT down to its simplest parts, using whatever symbol or abstraction I could possibly use to get through to the audience. At the same time, I've been a gamer for, I don't know, 20 years, give or take. And as a security professional, I felt like there wasn't a game out there for me that really did what I want to see when it comes to things like hacking or information security in a game. I know there's a lot of games that feature hacking as like a subsystem or as a feature, but it really didn't resonate with me as an IT professional. And I think the topic is so exciting and becoming more and more important every day that I sort of wanted to see it done, I guess, right in a game. Why we chose fantasy? We wanted to get away from all the technobabble and the technology. That stuff's actually super boring, right? Like, it's really boring, even for me. Me and my partner, Tim, we basically said, we're going to use fantasy because it's something that all us gamers know. We're all accustomed to it. We all know all the Tolkien tropes. That stuff's cool. It's fun. And we're going to use that stuff as a platform to teach what are otherwise sometimes pretty dry and confusing concepts like networking or cryptography. So that's sort of why we did it.
So, you know, being a YouTuber, for some of my research, one of the things I did was run the YouTube. And what I found was there's a handful of videos about Cryptomancer. Most of them are not in English.
Yeah, people, especially in France, France loves Cryptomancer. I don't know why, but that's awesome. I now really like France more than I already did. So yeah, some of them aren't in English. And then some of them, I don't know if you're alluding to this, some of them are in technobabble. Like one talk I did for a security conference last year. That was for St. Con. If you YouTube the phrase, kill all the orcs, hack all the things. It's me describing and defending Cryptomancer's IT abstraction to a bunch of security and IT nerds. So there are a couple actual plays on there too. Most of those folks are not in IT and they have a lot of fun with it. So maybe it's worth checking those out too.
Yeah, I did see some of those too. And if you just type in Cryptomancer RPG, you know, all that stuff you just mentioned actually comes up. But like I said, there just happened to be more things in other languages that came up than in English, which I was like, I know you had mentioned you had a partner. I'm like, so is this partner from somewhere else in the world? But apparently it's just people in France really like the game. That's cool. So the talk that I had actually listened to is the one that you just referenced. And so that convention is basically, you know, just for IT guys, you know, it's, you know, your standard industry convention. But so how did you end up pitching a basically RPG talk in there? Like, I would think, you know, most of it would be like industry stuff.
Yeah. So the security industry is big and broad, and there's just a lot of different types. There's stuffy suit types. There's like wear a ski mask and virtually rob banks type, and everything in between. There's elements of activism, and I mean, anything you could think of is represented in the security community. So some conferences are a little more open to weird ideas or really deconstructing what the hacker community or hacker society is, like culturally as well as professionally. So yeah, the pitch was, hey, I wrote a game about InfoSec and hacking. It's based on real life networking and crypto. We all have a hard time explaining this stuff to our organizations or peers or whatnot. And this is just one fun way to do it. So maybe you can learn something from it. So that's why they let me talk about it.
Okay, so I kind of find it a little bit funny, especially like in this day and age, it's less of a thing. But if you go back to like when you and I probably started playing this, but like, let me take this really like outside kind of ostracized community thing, and let me use that to explain it. And so I kind of like that kind of like runs through my head a little bit. One of our staff writers, Nigel, actually works in security as well, and I've accidentally offended him a couple times because I called him a security guard, which wasn't intentional. But he also does some cyber stuff as well, so that's cool. Maybe he'll check it out. He does a lot of writing on our site as well,
Awesome.
and so it's a really interesting concept to marry the two things together: hacking and fantasy. So I'm going to go out on a limb here, and Shadowrun just wasn't doing it for you.
No, and that's Shadowrun's a fine game. It's been around forever. A lot of people like it. A lot of people like the setting, especially. A couple people out there like the mechanics. But at the end of the day, Shadowrun does this thing, and maybe it was a smart design decision, but basically they turn hacking into either just a form of magic or combat that works against technology, or they break it out into this like scene within a scene where one person is kind of doing their thing while the rest of the party is twiddling their thumbs. And also from a technologist standpoint, they weren't necessarily, in my opinion, weren't necessarily keeping up with how technology was changing. And it's not that they have to keep up with the latest tech, but just in terms of how it's used and how it's totally normal in society. And, if you go back to like the early cyberpunk stuff of like Neuromancer, a lot of the technology that was described was like fantastic. Like before the internet, you had somebody floating through virtual reality, assuming an avatar, and it was crazy, this out-of-body experience. But the reality is, surfing the web is about as banal as it can be. Like a 6-year-old can do it, right? So just incorporating some of that reality, I think, was one of the goals.
Now you're a little out of touch. I think now like 3 and 4-year-olds are doing it. They're finding the apps on the phone. It's crazy, what they're doing. So we get a comment in the chat, Rep Ruck. Only a few like the mechanics of Shadowrun, LOL. And he's absolutely right there. I love the world of Shadowrun. Not a fan of the mechanics of it, and I've heard that over and over again. It's one of those games that we actually converted it to Cypher system and played, and I've also heard other people using the Apocalypse engine as well to play it as well. So the layout of the game, I was saying before we started, the actual book itself looks great. Like when you open it up, there's no doubt in your mind. It definitely like you feel like Neo from the Matrix, looking at the table of contents and the artwork. But so someone who's not necessarily into isn't a tech head like you are they going to enjoy this game the same way they would their Dungeons and Dragons, their Shadowrun?
I truly think so, and I've heard that from a wide range of folks who either have an IT background or don't know anything about computering. At the end of the day, this is a game about making characters who kill monsters, amass loot, level up. All the basic stuff we expect from the genre. Like we didn't want to get away from that. We enjoy that. Like that's just a lot of fun to me and my co-designer. But it sort of just adds on security and IT elements in a really unobtrusive way, I think. So I can give a really simple example. In the game, there's something called shards. So think of them, they're these gems, right? And if you grab a shard and you think something, that message goes to somebody else who has another shard. So what you have there is like instant, silent, and long distance communication between two players at any point. Now, if you think of a normal fantasy setting where you got to keep the party together and you're going through a dungeon and doing things, maybe you get caught, maybe there's an emergency. In this setting, you basically have the ability to say, I'm going to use my shard to call for backup. I'm going to use my shard to call our patron. I'm going to use my shard to call in an airstrike. I'm going to use my shard to call my lawyer because I've been caught. So yeah, just think about that like tiny concept of I'm a fantasy character, but I have the magical equivalent of an iPhone. How does that change everything about what I do?
So let's go big and then kind of like drill down. So, you know, give me the elevator pitch, not for the game, but the world.
Okay. So the world, and I'm just going to say this, the world is pretty generic. Like we built it because we want you to just like come in and be like, I know orcs, I know elves, I know dwarves. I'm ready to play this thing. Let's do it. That being said, the world was built kind of with the ideas of complexity theory and systems engineering. So I'll explain a couple examples of that. So in the game, the elves are not a bunch of tree-hugging hippies. In the game, the elves basically mass produce this heroin-type drug. And to do it, they actually have to do a bunch of deforestation. They use the Shardscape, which is the big network of all these magical communication shards, to manage huge swaths of forest that they've taken over with their limited numbers. And then they basically produce this good and sell it to the humans and dwarves who have markets developed to turn it into spices or liquor or drugs or whatnot. The dwarves, on the other hand, instead of being mead-swilling Scottish accent, you know, people with axes, they've sort of become these almost like Victorian era dilettantes because they've basically mastered the Shardscape and information security. They have a monopoly on who produces shards. They build something called golems, which are basically steam-powered firewalls in the game that other organizations want access to. And they control finance because the game has something equivalent to a modern credit card system or even Bitcoin system when it comes to finance. And then the humans, basically your standard medieval people. Imagine if a standard medieval people or society suddenly had the power of the internet overnight. Suddenly they had the power of anonymity when they're talking about power or problems. What if they suddenly had the ability to instantly communicate with other villages? If they had the ability to actually see what's going on in the world? So you're taking medieval modes of thinking and you're thrusting basically the power of the internet on them. What are they going to do? Are they going to continue to be like, yeah, the king is great and we can't do anything? Or are they going to organize and maybe rebel? At the same time, the power structures are using those very things that the people are using for resistance to perform surveillance on the entire society because everybody's collecting there, talking, planning. So of course, all your tyrants are going to be monitoring those systems.
I was going to say, one of the first things I noticed when I was poking around was your elves are anti-elves, which was cool. Dwarves are kind of the same, in my opinion. They're just, you know, they've just changed their focus on what they make.
Yep. And, you know, we weren't trying to, you know, one of the funnier things about game design talk is when people say the phrase, my elves are different, right? At the end of the day, elves are elves are elves, dwarves are dwarves are dwarves. It doesn't matter what you do with them. So we mostly embrace that.
Cool. So normally on the show, we do a roll call to see where people are from, where we're the far corners of the world we're delving and reaching into. So if you guys want to sound off, we got Techno already sounding off from Pennsylvania. There's a little bit of lag, but before long, the chat will start exploding with where everyone's from. We got Richie Orth from Holland. Really cool. that's what I know. I say this every time, but I really love the fact that people chime in from all over the place, and you get to reach into the far corners. We got Rep Ruck in Texas, Comic Book University in Krypton, you know, via way of Canada, via the way of Asbury Park. We got Corey from Wisconsin. And we got Kyle, our moderator, that's heading out soon from South Jersey as well. We got Brad Scary in Florida, Hawkeye 277 Boston. We got some more Canada in the house, Michigan, Wales, UK, Bulgaria. Hey, are you the guy we sent stuff to in Bulgaria? Jacksonville, Florida, San Antonio, Texas, Oregon, all over the place. So it's one of the really cool things. And I'm sure, you know, in your industry, you're dealing with people from all over the place as well, like Russian hackers.
He's big in France, from it sounds like.
Yeah.
Russia, China, and Nigeria, depending on the scam. But yes.
Nice.
Oh, yeah, and Kyle S. says, anybody else imagining medieval Watchdogs 2?
That's a perfect description.
Cool.
We also got some Finland in the house. So how long have you been working on Cryptomancer?
Cryptomancer was an 18-month development cycle. I talk about this in one of the talks I do, but it was great. So I'm a security professional, and Tim is a systems administrator. So the easy way of explaining that is a security guy basically annoys everybody and makes it impossible to do actual work, whereas a systems administrator actually has to make the spice flow in an organization. So if you think about our development cycle for the game, I would create these elaborate, really complex, super secure fantasy security systems and present them to Tim and be like, hey, Tim, check this out. And he'd be like, dude, this is so complex, and like nobody's going to be able to do anything with this at all. You have to scrap it. I'd be like, yeah, but how do I do this or that? And he's like, dude, it's fantasy, just magic. Like, just call it magic and move on. So that was a really useful partnership.
So he was your filter. Like, you're talking above us, bring it down.
He was, yeah. I owe so much to him in terms of the design of the Shardscape and the setting. So
I would like to point out, Chad, we really appreciate you showing up in uniform, the glasses and beard, you know.
And the hoodie. I don't have my ski mask, otherwise I'd wear that, or my Guy Fawkes mask. But
the running joke is the Nerdarchy uniform is beard and glasses.
Yeah, there's an impressive amount of facial hair on the screen right now.
We try.
So I noticed you mentioned humans, elves, and dwarves, but I read a little bit about something called a risk eater.
Yes. I'll talk about the risk eaters briefly. And risk eaters are exciting to talk about because a lot of the people who bought this game absolutely hate them and everything about them. So
well, they sound dangerous and possibly helpful at the same time.
Yeah, we'll discuss that. But here's an overview of the risk eaters. The risk eaters are basically if you mix the NSA with the Spanish Inquisition and put them like in Mordor.
Man.
So the risk eaters, they were built to anticipate and destroy global risk. When you have the Shardscape connecting all the disparate realms, you now have problems where things can get really bad really quick. Because of supply chains and communication lines, suddenly a zombie epidemic in a town can become a zombie epidemic in the region, right? Or market manias or like lopsided wars can happen, or like people can panic. And that can spread throughout the Shardscape. So this organization was built to prevent these cataclysmic events. Now, their way of doing this, they have these things called dwarven decision engines. They're these steam-powered machines that basically predict the future based on the input they receive from all their spies throughout the realms. So the decision engine will say, this person is going to grow up to be the next like fantasy version of Hitler. He needs to be destroyed. That person might even be a child. Doesn't matter to the decision engines. They're trying to prevent these horrible things from happening. So the risk eaters will dispatch assassins to go basically neutralize that threat. they're not really thinking about like, should I really be doing this? They're so dedicated to their mission of global harmony that they're actually lashing out like the absolute worst type of tyranny. The risk eaters also have determined that the players in the game are the next existential threat to humanity. That's sort of the thrust of the game in the beginning, is the players are on the run from the risk eaters. They might not even know why. They just know that they're on the run, and they've banded together and they found a patron in a safe house where they can start plotting. So that's the risk eaters. Omnipresent, omniscient, terrible, and it's basically a commentary on national security overreach.
So all the terribleness of them aside, does the Dwarven decision engine ever realize that it might be the problem? Or is that not in its program? Because what if you chasing this person or trying to kill them makes them be against you when they weren't really in the beginning and it was just a mistake? So I mean, I could see that as being some self-reflection. Or like, does a risk eater going rogue? Is there any like faction within that's about them deciding that this was a bad idea?
So those are fascinating questions that I have predominantly left unanswered. What if the decision engine says the risk eaters are a threat to the realms, right? Or what if the resistance organization is able to somehow inject themselves into the intelligence feed that's feeding the decision engines and start to manipulate what the decision engines think, like what assignments they start giving? What if the risk eaters are actually really good guys? Like they have horrible tactics, but they actually are trying to prevent something truly terrible. There's a lot of questions there, but I basically leave that up to the players in the community to start riffing on.
Now I understand some of the reviews I've read. So basically, I've seen the game accused of being a bit of a meat grinder, and I've seen the word death spiral used, and not in a favorable way either. And basically, it sounds like these risk eaters, and that's what they're referring to, because they're out to get the party. And so a few people have described the game like as being, well, this game is where it's just about the DM trying to TPK the party. But that being said, I know with any tabletop RPG, it could be like that, or it could be something completely different depending on the group you have.
Yep.
Yeah, the game master, whoever is running the game, is always always couldn't be viewed as the adversary to the party. But with the risk eaters, that's just an element. Okay, well, if you're there, as a DM, you make villains. You do that all the time. In fact, that's like if you do a game didn't have a villain, it would seem, or overarching story plot with it, it can be kind of boring eventually. Like, oh well, we played for 2 years, but we really have just goofed off.
There's a good analogy in the chat. Techno Junior sounds like Minority Report. It does sound exactly like that with those guys. They're they're out instead of your thoughts though. They're scanning the web, see what people are doing, or the shards, and seeing what people are doing, and then picking them out and taking out the threats. What about the mechanics of the game?
Mm-hmm. So I can talk about, there's two things to talk about. There's what would be the tactical mechanics. So things like skill checks and building characters and resolving conflicts. And then there's the strategic mechanics, which include this death spiral we're talking about, as well as other strategic elements like building up your safe house, or what are you doing when you're off camera during planning. So which should I start with?
Whatever you think's a better intro into the world.
Okay. I'll start with the strategic elements because the tactical stuff's pretty straightforward. It's a skill-based kind of traditional game. So we'll start, since we were talking about the death spiral, let's talk about that. So the game incorporates a mechanic called risk. And risk is basically how angry the risk eaters are at your party. Do they perceive you as a minor annoyance that needs to be sort of managed? Or are you such a threat that they need to launch everything they have at you? Risk accumulates two ways. One, either by practicing really bad operational security. So this is something where, like, if you have a mission and the party just says, we're just going to kick down the front door and kill everybody, that generates risk, right? Kind of crazy behaviors like that generate risk. The other thing that's
not really predictable behavior.
Yeah, yep, and it's noisy, and people talk about it, and they're not like covering the evidence. So the game sort of tries to reinforce practicing good security at all times. You're on the run, right? Like you don't want to make a racket. The other way to generate risk is actually by player choice. They can say, I'm going to turn this failure of a roll into a success, and I'm going to buy that with risk. So you can have, you can roll terribly, but then you can say, no way, man, like fate's going our way this time. And you suddenly succeed dramatically. But because you've sort of defied fate, now the risk eaters are like, oh, geez, like these guys are serious. They're a problem. So you're generating risk that way. There are things called risk triggers, which say, okay, you have X number of risk, but now something's going to happen where you make a roll to determine if the risk eaters actually just jump out of the bushes out of nowhere and start attacking you with assassins. So those events are, if you ever don't have a patron is somebody who sponsors your safe house and protects you from the risk eaters. So if you don't have a patron, if you're camping outside of your safe house, or if you make a critical failure and the GM says, instead of punishing you with the outcome of this critical failure, I'm just going to make a risk check and see what happens. So all those three events can result in the risk eaters, again, just coming out of nowhere. Suddenly the NPCs you've known and trusted, like decrypt their face and like they become these horrible assassins and they're coming at you with knives and you're running away. And of course, they're very powerful. So it's usually a bad outcome.
So I feel like an interesting turn of events for a game of this would actually be playing the risk eaters. Being recruited by them to go out and take out other groups.
I totally agree. Many people have commented, I actually want to play the risk eaters. Because, yeah, think about it. They're assigned these horrible missions for the greater good of some steam-powered robot that may or may not understand what's going on. And that's insanity, right? So, yeah, it'd be another classic story of you're in this big evil organization. You've realized it's bad. How do you get out? And then you have all these other agents coming after you. But that's a good call.
Yeah, one of our commenters, Rep Brock, points out risk should be in every game to prevent murder hobos. So I could definitely see if you're a player and you play murder hobo style games, and that's as a DM you're running those kind of games. This game is the antithesis to what you're used to.
I think that's fair. And, to some of the reviewers that were really angry about this mechanic and think it's just like unfair and mean, we're definitely not trying to punish any type of play. We're not trying to say that if you play these Gonzo campaigns, you're a bad gamer or anything like that. This is just a game about security at its core, right? And OPSEC. So we're just trying to reinforce that.
And I see this as just simply there is built-in game mechanics to show, hey, in a lawful society, no matter how authoritarian or totalitarian it is, when you break the rules or you make a fuss, you're going to be punished in some way. Rather than it being whether or not the DM feels like creating a scenario that's going to punish you. It's built-in rules on like, oh yeah, if they go around doing this, kicking in doors, shooting people and stealing stuff, there's already a built-in system to deal with that. Rather than, I guess I'll get some paladins to come get you, maybe? I don't know. What do I do?
That's a really good point. If this is a game about a surveillance state and it's oppressive and authoritarian, the mechanics do have to sort of reinforce that. Like otherwise it doesn't matter. It's just total fluff, right?
Yeah, because it sounds like you wouldn't be playing the game that you've designed if you left it up to the DM on whether or not they were going to be like heavy-handed or like a light touch of this kind of system.
Exactly. Now, two things we've done to address this. First of all, we all know the golden rule of gaming. Everybody knows that if you don't like a mechanic, ignore it, right? So risk is something you can actually pull out of Cryptomancer, and it's still a fully functional game. So folks can keep that in mind. The other thing that we did is we released a free supplement called Code and Dagger that actually comes with Cryptomancer. If you buy the PDF or the book, you get Code and Dagger for free. Code and Dagger provides mechanics where you can sort of subvert the risk system and basically finally take the risk eaters on. You go to their spire where they watch the realms, and you basically launch this massive fantasy orgy battle to destroy them finally. So it's it gives some types of fantasy gamers exactly the outcome they want. So we're trying to appeal to all things.
So Brian Smith asked a good question, and that is, do the risk eaters always terminate the characters, or could they bring them in to trial or anything?
The game just says they come out of nowhere and obliterate. Like they designed to kill. But to the point of Brian, if I don't know, was that the name?
Yes, Brian. Yep.
You're thinking better than we were when we designed this thing, right? Like hindsight is 2020, but you're totally on point. A risk trigger should do things like bring folks in for interrogation or a court scene. That's excellent drama. Or a risk trigger could trigger something terrible in the realms. Suddenly a zombie outbreak happens in the town where your hideout is, right? So you're totally on point. I wish we thought of that, but you can do it in your game. So please.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that's the biggest thing with RPGs, and I don't know. We say it over and over again. No matter what system you're using, what game you're playing, like if you have a cool idea, just because the rules don't address that cool idea, there's no reason why you can't just put it in the game and have fun with it. So is the game level-based, class-based? I know you said skills, but that can mean a couple different things in my mind.
Yep. So let's go back to the tactical stuff, or like the skill rolls and all that. So when you build a character, you pick a race, either elf, human, or dwarf. There is absolutely no mechanical difference between those, and I know that's heresy, but that's what we did. Next, you have 4 core stats, and you populate them with a score that represents below average, average, or above average. And then from those, you splinter off into 2 attributes. So I can give an example. There's a core rank called speed. It's how fast your character is generally. And that splinters off into 2 stats. One is dexterity. So can I shoot a bow? Can I pick a lock? Can I pick a pocket? And then agility. Can I like tumble and jump over things and climb things? So you basically populate those with numbers. It takes about 2 minutes to do. You determine things like HP and MP. And then you have 10 points to pick all your cool stuff, your talents or spells. There's a ton of talents. I think there's like 80 of them, and they cover everything from I can kill really good to nuancey things like because I'm highborn, if I'm at a gala and one of my peers embarrasses him or herself, I can swoop in and basically make the roll on their behalf and kind of cover up their mistake. Then there's a bunch of spells. We designed spells to focus on tradecraft, espionage, spying, surveillance, but we also have some classic stuff like I'm going to chuck a fireball and kill everybody because that stuff's awesome, right? We're gamers. Give me a break. So yeah, that's basically making a character in a nutshell.
Okay, so I want to backtrack a little bit. You said steampunk elements, so would you say this is kind of like an Arcana punk world? What level of technology is there other than the shards?
So the only technology worth calling out that's not straight up medieval would be steam-powered things by the dwarves. So there will be simple locomotives and steam-powered golems, which are basically these giant steam-powered octopus things that are managing multiple shard nets with their hands, right? Like a single person, they can hold a shard and communicate with it. They can hold 2 shards of 2 different networks and bridge those so 2 networks can talk to each other. But these steam-powered golems have like 8 or 10 arms. They can hold all these different networks and connect them or drop connections.
So they're like a server or some kind of hub kind of thing.
Yeah, they are a network appliance. The cross between like a firewall or a web proxy or a NAT interface. It's tech, right? But yeah. But those would be the examples of technology, and it's mostly dwarven. Primarily, though, this is a fantasy kind of traditional medieval type of technology setting.
The most important thing I heard from any of that was you can do a train heist.
Yes, train heists and bank robberies. You can do an ATM bank robbery. There's a component in the core game called crypto gears. What a crypto gear is, it's a simple switch that when you issue the right command to it over the shardnet, it will turn, right? So you can have like a railroad switching network where you have an administrator that's switching the tracks by issuing commands. Now, an attacker could do all kinds of bad things to that, right? It could divert a train. It can make two trains collide. So the possibilities are endless with crypto gears.
So you could also do, sounds like a great setting for espionage and counter espionage, is, terrorist threats and anti-terrorism task force and stuff like that. Also, I do want to point out, guys, that it's actually priced very reasonably. I checked it out on Drive-Thru RPG. The PDF's like $10, but the actual physical copy of it, I think, was like $38. So it's very reasonable. Not bad at all.
If you buy the book, you get the PDF for free. And what's not mentioned on there is it also comes with Code and Dagger. That's a 50-page source book with a bunch of expansions and new stuff for the game. So that comes with it too.
Definitely worth mentioning. And what was I going to say? Nope, that's all I got for now. I thought I had something fell right out. It'll come back to me. But yeah, like that was one of the things that I noticed when I went over there to check it out and put the link in the description. So if people are interested, they can check that out. The page count. The page count is
430 something.
30 something. Yeah, it's a meaty book. It's decent size.
No.
That was the other thing I wanted to point out. When most of the books we're buying now, they're $60, and 100 pages later than that easy. So right. That was definitely worth noting.
Thanks for calling that out. The price point was decided because this is my hobby and this is my passion, and my mission is to teach information security, networking, privacy, some thoughts, maybe a manifesto about national security and surveillance. So we just want to get it in many hands as possible. So that explains the price point. We didn't want to do it for free, right? Because things that are free have no value, no perceived value in their audience. So that's kind of why we settled on $10 for the PDF.
I don't blame you. I don't believe in free either. Free is the enemy. So, sorry, I was going somewhere again.
Well, Dave's thinking of this question. I really enjoyed the art in this, especially the cover is fantastic.
Thank you.
And it gives me, it's not quite Planescape, but that elf is like, oh, this reminds me of Planescape just enough that I'm liking it.
Oh yeah, the art style.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Philip, my artist, the reason I chose him is, well, I just liked his stuff, but he was actually very comfortable in both fantasy and science fiction elements. A lot of times if you go on ArtStation, so many artists are multi-talented, but a lot of artists will be like, I just do fantasy, and or I just do science fiction. And he really did both, and that was the mindset I was going for. Mm-hmm. Now the images are mostly very traditionally fantasy stuff. I mean, this is people with swords and adventurers around a campfire. But just having the right mindset for the game was important, and I think he did really well.
Now, with these, I mean, aside from the only technology being like a train and like this network thing going on with the octopus like steam engine, you said Golem?
Yep.
Is that where? Yeah. So aside from that, it's pretty much medieval in a sense. So what would you say is the biggest difference between what we consider the internet and everything, the interconnectedness of nations right now, and what's found in Cryptomancer? Because I don't want to just stick the World Wide Web idea in my mind onto this game and say, oh, that's how it works.
Right. That's an excellent question. The actual differences get into more, it gets into slightly more technical than I want to, but I'm going to try it here. So in the game, most networks, that is, when I say networks or shard nets, I'm talking about shards that can only communicate to each other and no other device. So the party might have a private shard net. That means they can communicate with each other, but there's no traffic either inbound or outbound to any other network. They have this closed network that they're protecting. So a bad guy actually, to access their network, they need to get physical access to one of their shards. And now they can start listening on that private network. So what you have is the only time that you're interacting with the entire universe over the Shardnet is when you're accessing what are called the Shardscape, which are these big, private, huge shards that are about the size of a phone booth, where you walk up, you stand in line, and you put your hand against it, and now you're interacting with all kinds of people. So there is clear separation between private networks that are used by organizations and the big public network. So that would be a primary technical difference. That means you don't have to worry about, I'm just sitting here and now somebody's hacking my device from the other side of the world. That doesn't happen in this game.
It shouldn't happen here either, but we like the convenience of being connected to the internet whenever.
Absolutely.
It's too great, I guess.
Yeah. And we made that decision because otherwise it gets so complex and such a mess that you don't even want to play with it anymore as a gamer. You just want to keep these small, tight networks. You can understand what's happening. And when somebody makes the strategic decision to bridge two networks, that's like an event. That's like, oh, geez, we're connected to this other network. We need to be really careful because now they can hear what we're thinking. We can hear what they're thinking. So we have to use cryptography and stuff to communicate, and cool stuff happens.
So I did notice one kind of unique thing in this day and age, especially with a small indie pub, and that is no Kickstarter.
Yeah. So from a marketing and business success standpoint, that was a truly terrible idea. I should have done a Kickstarter.
It's not too late. Come out with another book, 2.0.
The hardback.
My next game will be Kickstarter. But here's the thing with Kickstarter. This is our first gaming show. This is our first game, our first product. We wanted to make damn sure that we could deliver and put out a good product and have it succeed by its own merits and by its word of mouth before we go out there and start asking for money.
Well, kind of funny story to add to that. Brian, who we had on previously, he gives his game away for free, and he still ran a very successful Kickstarter.
Yep.
So.
I think it's a no-brainer. I think if you want to succeed in this market, you got to do a Kickstarter, and duly noted. But again, I was just very nervous. I didn't want to. Managing a Kickstarter is its own big project.
Yes.
And we were focusing. We just wanted to make the best game we could, and we didn't want to get mixed up with the business angle.
When did Cryptomancer come out? When did you guys publish?
August 1st last year.
Okay, it's still pretty fresh.
Yep.
Nice.
And I think we've done remarkably well for zero marketing. Between PDF and books, it's sold almost 1,800 copies. So we're really pleased and delighted it's done this well, despite not having a Kickstarter.
You had said to me before we had actually gotten started here, you're like, I kind of been pitching this and presenting it to a lot of my peers and people in the security niche. And
Yep.
then you decided when you reached out to us, well, maybe I should tell people in the actual gaming niche about this game.
Yeah. So one of the reasons for that is when you're making a game and when the tagline says this game is for hackers by hackers, and when you profess to actually teach concepts of networking or cryptography to people, you need to get the buy-in and basically you got to do that from a position of authority. And so my goal was to reach out to fellow InfoSec and cybersecurity professionals and be like, gang, check this out. And them to say, yes, this is awesome. This is a good teaching mechanism. You do things like networking and crypto justice. Thank you. Proceed. So now that we've sort of gotten that buy-in from the security community, now I feel like I can go out to the rest of the gaming community and really, with some sense of authority, say, no, seriously, this game will teach you this stuff the right way.
So my opinion, and it's just my opinion of that, I feel like guys like me don't really care. They just want to play a cool game. And so that's, I see it as that's a kind of personal thing you put on the game, which is cool. That you had a goal and that was your goal. And now you've kind of you put it out there to your peers and you gotten their approval.
Yeah,
So
it's
now
peer
you're
review.
coming forward. Yeah. But now I feel like you're going to go into the game world and be like, whatever, elves and elves and locomotives and iPhones, got you.
That's totally fair. I would say any designer out there, do not take any business lessons from me. I mean, holy crap! A lot of missed opportunities, a lot of bad assumptions, a lot of shooting myself in the foot. We are damn proud of our product. Don't get me wrong, it kills. But from if you're actually trying to make money doing this, whatever we did, do the opposite.
But that being said, there's nothing wrong with doing it your way and having your own standards that you want to meet. And the end result and outcome is people like me who play this game may accidentally learn something.
Sure.
So
good. That's the idea.
Now, you were saying that this was your first project. You have another one coming down the pipeline?
I do, and we've learned many lessons, some of the lessons we've been discussing. The new game, it's still sort of a secret project. It's still going to have a slight teaching angle, but it's going to be about different topics. But it's going to be a 1980s setting or period piece. It's going to be about basically going to take the political and technical lessons from the Arab Spring and throw them into a 1980s America that is sort of RoboCop meets Red Dawn meets Akira. So yeah, it's going to be really weird. I think really exciting. We have a new artist. It's going to be full color. Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a sweet, professional, awesome, unique product. And there's going to be a Kickstarter. So it'll be different.
So are you going to use the same game engine, same game mechanics?
It's going to be actually a simplified version, but it's also going to borrow a little bit from some of the story game or narrative community. So so basically same task resolution, but how well someone does on a dice roll determines how much narrative power they have to narrate the outcome. So if you do really poorly, the GM narrates the outcome and can add these elements of drama or pain. But if you roll really well, you're actually narrating the outcome and you're telling the GM what happened. So it's sort of it's built like a traditional game with GM versus player or GM with player, but the narrative control depends on the dice rolls.
Okay, because now we've got several examples of that, right? We've got the Forerunner pretty much would be like Fate, even third edition, Ebron had introduced action points, which is kind of similar. You have Mutants and Masterminds that also has hero points for doing similar things like that. Cypher system, you basically has a mechanic where you spend XP, and then they're kind of simple in comparison to you have Fantasy Flight Star Wars game where you actually have narrative dice that determine the outcome as well.
Right.
So it sounds like you're a little bit in the middle there.
Yeah, exactly. Just trying to keep up with where the industry's going.
Well, it's interesting to see, where the industry goes, and I find certain players just gravitate towards certain systems, and I've enjoyed I've enjoyed everything from the Star Wars, which is very dice centric with the narrative dice, to the Fate system where you kind of edit things. And I haven't played Apocalypse Engine, but I believe that's also one of those where like it was explained to me, like initiative is whoever has something cool to do first, goes first. Yep. Kind of deal.
Totally.
What is your gaming background? Where do where did you cut your teeth, and what are the games that you generally played before designing this?
Yeah, I think my first game was Palladium's TMNT and Other Strangeness when I was like 10 years old. That was when the Ninja Turtles were hot. I mean, they're still hot. Come on, but that blew my mind. I got to like make a mutant parakeet with like 100 bio-E points that had mind-crushing psychic powers, and I'm like, this is my passion. I found who I am, right? Get a little bit older, dabbled in like D&D 3.5, and then in the 90s, late 90s, Vampire and Vampire Dark Ages. That was my jam. that's still sort of my standard when it comes to mainstream games that influence me. I mean, recently, I think, looking at my shelf here, I mean, recently for mainstream games, Fantasy Flight's Edge of the Empire, you've been talking about that. I like that game. But at the end of the day, I mostly play very traditional and very mainstream games. I'm not a story game guy. I like to learn from some of those games and incorporate some of those elements. But I'm pretty traditional when it comes to my gaming.
Nothing wrong with that. I mean, we still play. Most of our channel is Dungeons and Dragons. Now we like to dip into other systems, and like I feel like one of the strengths of our channel, what we can do is by being so mainstream with Dungeons and Dragons, it allows us to reach a larger audience for a game we honestly enjoy. But at the same time, when we kind of take these side excursions, we just know a certain amount of our audience is going to come with us. So we enjoy that aspect of just getting them to look at different things, different genres, different systems. We get the question all the time, like, how do I play Star Wars with 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons? I'm like, well, you don't. They've got a game for that. Why don't you just use that?
Yeah.
Instead of like doing all this extra work.
Sure. No, that's cool. I mean, nobody should apologize for the games they play, and that's awesome.
Well, yeah, like so certain games just do certain things well. Dungeons and Dragons doesn't do anything well other than Dungeons and Dragons. So it's kind of silly to try and shoehorn into these other genres. So
Sure.
you can just play them and have a good time.
Totally.
You might have to learn a new system, but that's part of the fun too.
Yep, agreed.
We've got like of our live games that we do, the home game, we've got 3 games going on, and 2 of them are long-running 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons games. And then we have a third one that kind of does these short arcs, and we've just been rotating out different games. Shadowrun with Cypher System, FFG, Star Wars. What else have we played over there? We're playing Gamma World now. We'll probably go into Savage Rifts next. And it just gives us a chance to explore different systems, different games, and expose, the audience to different things.
I recently played my first diceless, GM-less tabletop game, and I had an absolute blast. And I can't see myself actually that being my primary means of tabletop, but it was totally awesome. And I'm glad I just took a risk and tried something different.
Did you say GM-less and diceless?
Yeah. I tried Protocol by Jim Pinto or Post World Games, and it uses basically cards, and you turn up a card, and both the number and the face of the card tells you kind of where your location is and what the drama aspect of the scene is, and then it has other clues to tell you how to narrate that scene. So it was pretty exciting.
Yeah, because without some kind of mechanic, you guys are just sitting around telling a story.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, but that is cool, and it is great when you can, when trying out new things. I always encourage everybody to do that. We actually have a question for you from Rhett Brock. Is there, or have you created a online way to play the game? I feel online play would pair well with this. Online is the way I play most of my D&D games nowadays. At the very least, online community.
Yeah, so I haven't created anything specifically for that. I am currently in a Cryptomancer campaign where I'm actually a player, which is really exciting. And we do that over Roll20. And because a lot of this game's combat is like mind's eye theater or abstract ranges, like you're either close or medium or long distance, and you can go from short range to long range within X amount of movements or whatever. There's no need for like a battle map or miniatures. So something like Roll20 works totally fine.
So I guess like the next step is now putting together that community so that they can start playing.
Yeah. So I'm, I'm sort of a one-man shop right now when it comes to design, and I'm working really aggressively on making a new game. I want to continue to support Cryptomancer, but I have to make these hard trade-offs between, do I have a new volume of Code and Dagger coming out, or do I need to meet these deadlines to make sure that the new game will hit? So I wish I had more time. I wish this was my full-time gig.
Let's see. What was I going to ask? Oh, on your you have a website. Is there a forum on there or anything?
There's not a forum. There is a subreddit, a Cryptomancer subreddit. And it's just r/Cryptomancer. So there's some folks engaging there.
Oh, excellent. Well, then that would be a place for people that are interested to go and find like-minded individuals.
Yeah, for sure.
Nice. So I feel like in this, in this day and age, it's like so important to get a community together to play the game and for people to come together, especially for an indie guy like you. That is like you need some kind of outreach.
Yeah, I agree. I try as best I can. One component where we did include the community was releasing Code and Dagger. Code and Dagger was basically all the ideas were written or conceived by fellow nerd gamers. They were sent to me like, hey, here's a cool idea. And then I basically edited them and changed them or rewrote them and put them in. So when you're reading Code and Dagger, it actually says in each chapter who contributed to this. So I had something like maybe 7 or 8 people write content for the game or create content for the game, and that informed Code and Dagger. So I'd like to keep doing that.
So I got something for you. It'll make it really easy because I can understand where you're coming from. And I didn't bring you on here just to break your chops. Why not just start a Facebook group and send everybody there? They'll figure it out.
I do have a Facebook page. I don't have a group yet.
Create a group and just direct everyone there, and then they'll figure it out. They'll play.
Awesome. Done. I'll do that.
We have a small Facebook group for our fans, and games pop up in there from time to time, and we didn't that's without us suggesting anything. So they'll find a way. You just got to find a place to put them together, and this way, it's not like a forum where you're going to have to upkeep it or anything like that. Once you have some people that are really vested in your community, you can make them your moderators or admins or whatever. Right. That would probably help a lot. I mean, that's just a suggestion.
That's a good idea. I'll check that out.
So, and it's easy. We like easy at Nerdarchy.
Yeah, so do I, man.
Especially we all full-time jobs, families, the whole shebang. We know what it's like to try and create stuff, and then in addition to having to live and then having a life on top of all that as well.
Right. Yeah, it's rough.
So you said it took about 18 months for the whole project, start to finish?
Yep.
That's a pretty fast turnaround for 2 guys.
Yeah, a lot of long weekends. But at one point we set a deadline, like the game is going out August 2016, no matter what. And we released the game, and anything that's going to be released is going to be imperfect. If you're trying to make the perfect product, it'll just never get done. So with warts and all, we sent it out, and it was painful because we're like, no, it's not what we want exactly, but you gotta eventually go or get off the pot.
No, I totally agree. You can sit around thinking about things forever. Sometimes you just got to move fast and break stuff.
Absolutely. I've had people suggest ideas. I mean, just like what happened during this call of like, can other things happen with risk eaters? I've had people suggest stuff, and I'm like, I can't believe I didn't do that. I'm so mad I didn't do that. Of course I should have done that. Duh. But that's part of being a designer, right? And that's cool.
Well, yeah, a fresh set of eyes, different perspective. It changes everything. So, is there any parting words you want to leave our fans with?
No, I want them to buy my game, and if that's all I got, and if it's not your thing, that's cool too. I mean, whatever, do whatever, man.
I definitely see. I do definitely see interest in the chat, and definitely one of the guy, the rep that asked about, is there a community anywhere? He's like, well, you'd like to try and play it. You'd play it before he bought it, and it seems fair enough to me. So, like I said, Facebook page would do it, or you could probably start Roll20 groups too, right? Don't they have like pages over there where it's kind of the same thing?
Yeah, I think so. I haven't played with Roll20 other than being a player, so I don't know what the administrative options are. But
Yeah, I'm new to Roll20 myself. I just started in a game like last week, so
yep.
I'm a noob over there.
I guess my other parting words are: if you need to steal my game, that's cool. So I'm a hobbyist. I'm not doing this to make money. Do not steal other people's property. Just steal mine. But don't host it on something where I can Google it, because I will come after you. I'm capable.
I'm a security guy.
But you know, if you need to share it with your community, with your players, do it, man, and come back to the till and pay if you dig it.
That's fair enough. Oh, also too, like I find sometimes people will do pay what you want, and this is what I've heard anyway. And then people that will go back and buy it after getting it for free if they like it, but you know, just to give to the creator or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like a Patreon.
Yeah,
like a strange Patreon.
So you know, maybe we'll have to get together a Cryptomancer and we can check it out and show it off a little bit. I had one of my staff writers checking it out, because he's just he's just an RPG enthusiast beast, and like I gave it to him, and the next day he's messaging me at like 2 a.m, you know, about the game. You know, hit me with different bullet points. He's like, "Can I just call you?" I'm like, "I guess so."
Awesome. Well, there's if people want to see how it's played, there's actual plays on YouTube. You can find it pretty easy. So maybe check that out.
Excellent.
Yes, I would just impulse buy it immediately, though. I mean, if I'm giving advice.
Yeah,
shut up and take my money.
Yeah. It's only $10 anyway if you to grab the PDF and check it out. So it looks interesting. I've enjoyed the conversation we had with you here today. We appreciate you coming on. So with that, we're going to wrap things up. So until next time, guys, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy.
Thanks, guys.